Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast, Real Estate Investing for Professional Men and Women. Welcome aboard, engineers, pilots, teachers, chiropractors, dentists. We're all in the group here. I'm a business owner myself, and obviously we all invest in real estate. We just do it. We don't really care so much about all the no money down, owner financing, buying on terms. We call it smoke and mirrors techniques. It all works. I'm not knocking it. I used to do it myself, but generally people who are professionals and business owners understand the value of having skin in the game, and you get better deals, better financing, everything. So that's really what this is all about. If you haven't already done so, please feel free to subscribe. It's on a number of channels. And also, more importantly, go to the website, realestatewithgarywilson.com, click on members area, and the next page, if you're already a member, you know what to do. If you're not, on the right-hand side, click on that because you can get in for free for a short period of time just to check it out, see what it's all about. Be on the weekly webinars. Doesn't cost anything. There's all kinds of tools out there, calculators, spreadsheets, hundreds and hundreds of recordings on Airbnb, assisted living, 1031 exchange. It's all out there at your disposal. So feel free. Also, go to Facebook and click on Real Estate with Gary Wilson Facebook page there too. There's a group we have called Real Estate Investor Agent. We just started it. It's pretty active. Already got a few thousand people. Jump on there because that doesn't cost anything, and you can get some free education there too. So in any case, without further ado, we got a special guest, Jenny Davis, all the way from Scotland, all right? And a professional cycler, got a great story to tell, and she's going to help us all going through what we're going through right now, which is, how do we handle crisis mode, and what do we do in challenging times? How do we keep our business up and running and help our team work together? So Jenny, welcome aboard. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, Gary. Good to be here and sharing some stories and hopefully some insights for your listeners. So we've got a windy day in Edinburgh today, but I think the internet connection's working good. So
yeah, so far so good. Well, I appreciate you taking your valuable time to do this. I know you're a busy person, so we really do appreciate that. But if you want to, go ahead. Would you mind just kind of painting a picture for everybody? Just get them to know you a little bit about yourself, because I've kind of wet their whistle about where you're from and one of your favorite activities. So kind of paint a picture for us, if you don't mind.
Sure. So a quick skim of my journey so far. I actually started as a judo athlete. Age 6 or 7, and fought for Scotland in Team GB through until my early 20s. Mm-hmm. That was kind of where my improvement journey started, because I'm quite a competitive person and wanted to always continue to make improvements and progress and get better results. So while I was in the last year of uni and doing health psychology, I ended up taking a gap year from my judo career just so that I could finish with a good honours degree, and eventually ended up doing a talent transfer across to track cycling, and then I had kind of 10-12 years of a career racing all over the world on the velodromes, both Europe, the States, Trinidad and Tobago. So I'd done a bit out in Colorado Springs and Trexler Town as well out in the States. So the heat's nice and warm out there for the velodromes for racing. Mm-hmm. You don't have any issues with rain and slipping off and stuff. So, and then kind of in between Commonwealth Games and Olympic trials, I started my change career in a FTSE 100 company in the UK. And that kind of came about, I was doing a presentation on how I'd improved my sporting performance, and the kind of senior leader in the room, once it had finished, asked if the principles that I'd talked about could be applied in business. And I said yes, and that kind of was the catalyst for the last 5 to 10 years of business improvements and supporting and leading others through change and improvements. So I think that's my sporting career and my working careers have kind of merged through time. And I've retired now from my racing days, but they're still very much connected, and I still train every day. It's one of my coping mechanisms for dealing with change that's difficult, and keeps my body and mind in good tip-top condition to allow me to help as many people and add as much value as I can.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty awesome, by the way, and I appreciate you mentioning that, because I know, we're all connected, all of us here, and also internally in our own lives. All the areas of our lives are definitely interconnected. What happens in our business has an effect on what happens when we're with our family, and has an effect on what happens with our friends, and what we do for their own bodies, health-wise, has a great impact on every other area of our life too. So I like the fact that you not only recognize that, but you actually implement that in how you serve others through your business. You take what you've learned and developed in one area of your life and help others through channeling through another area of your life, which is business. So if you wouldn't mind, let's go ahead and jump into that. I see you've got some pretty impressive credentials here, and everybody listening, you're going to see this on the page where you watch the podcast. You're going to see all this, and definitely we'll give you an opportunity at the end to follow up with Jenny. But who wouldn't want to connect with Jenny based on her just what you've heard so far? so if you could, obviously right now, this is going to date time this podcast here. We're starting to see our way out of this coronavirus pandemic and how it's affected everybody's lives. We're still in it, but I think we see light at the end of the tunnel. And people, I'm a business owner, Jenny, I know you are too. All over the world, people are wondering, well, how do I not just survive but thrive? Because most of us who are entrepreneurs, and we've come through challenges, whether they're in sports or business lives, recognize that usually these are the greatest opportunities for growth and development. So what would you say when it comes to a company where their employees are struggling emotionally, they're watching the news, and how would you actually lead and support a team through a crisis like this and the change that goes with it? What would that look like?
Sure, really good question. So I think that there's probably a couple of different approaches to it. One for the business owner themselves, and two in terms of how to support that team. So from a business owner point of view, so I don't know if your listeners will be aware of, there's a famous change model called the Kubler-Ross model, or the change curve. And it talks about when people go through crisis or change, especially something that's unexpected, there's different phases that they can kind of emotionally go through. So there's shock and denial is the first one. We've got anger. There's bargaining, which is where they try and kind of get round the change or through it, or negotiate their way out. There's depression, which is right at the bottom of it. And then there's acceptance, where people start to move out of it. And those 5 phases, if you've seen, comments and videos and coverage by the media about what's going on just now, you can see lots of examples of those different types of reactions that people are having. And I think it's really important for business leaders to be aware of where they are in those phases. And right now, it's really, really important, even though there's so much firefighting and chaos, to give yourself time to think, to take a step back and give yourself some breathing space, so that you can make some really smart decisions. Because obviously there's going to be some businesses that their customer demand has dropped overnight, or their customer demand is massively increased and they don't have the infrastructure or the staffing levels to be able to cope with that. So I think having space and looking after yourself and your family is really important, and being aware of where you are emotionally on that curve, and I guess using all the strategies that you've created throughout your life to try and deal with that emotional state. So I know if I have an anger, I tend to go and do like a boxing session in the garage,
Okay.
just to hit my way out of that. It's a positive way to channel negative energy, or I'll go and beast it out on the bike, and then when I come back, I feel better.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important. Give yourself space. Know where you are emotionally on that curve, and use the strategies that you've already kind of developed through life to help you deal with those. And then from a team perspective, everybody goes through those 5 change phases at different times and at different depths.
Mm-hmm.
And there's things that you can do to really help people in those phases, and there's things that you can do that will completely make it worse. So I guess the common theme that runs through all of those 5 phases is really being really clear and open and honest with your communications about what's happening, about what you need their help with, about why things are happening, why you're making certain decisions. And I guess it's not about trying to force people through the phases. If you manage it well, it's about reducing the depth of the pain that people feel and the amount of time that they spend in each of those phases. So there's more detailed, I guess, guidelines about what you can and can't do that I can provide at the end. I'll put a web page up with an email series and video series that can talk your listeners through what they can do at each of those phases, just to help your listeners out. But communication's really key, and having patience. And I think as a leader, it's about role modeling what you're looking for in terms of behavior. So if you're running around like a headless chicken and you're really angry, your people are going to feed off that. So sometimes it's appropriate to share that with those that are around you, and sometimes it's important to lead and be a good role model and deal with the emotions in a different setting.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Absolutely. And what's interesting while you were talking, I'm thinking of a perfect example of, like, in a practical way, how this applies now, because we're talking about communication. And if you think about it, a larger number of people now more than ever are working from home. And I haven't had a physical office outside the house in 5 years. And now I'm used to it. Everybody works for me, works in their own home too. So to us, this was like nothing really changed. But what would you say to people, like, now that their employee force has been working from home, when it comes to like distraction control, and how do they optimize their current working conditions? Because we've got children, dogs, and cats running around. The phone, the siren goes off. So we're working from home. Kind of talk about that a little bit. Like, how do you control these distractions? How do you create an optimum working condition?
Sure. Really good question. Distraction control, optimum working conditions are 2 of my favorite topics, because they're really easy for people to go away, have a think about, implement, and hopefully, like, if somebody takes some of the advice today, they could implement it later on today. So in terms of distraction control, it's pretty easy. Somebody I could sit down and in 5 minutes list down all the potential distractions that might appear during the day. And it might not matter for a lot of the time, but there's going to be certain meetings or certain calls that you're on that you don't want to be interrupted. So, for example, I obviously wanted to put an hour aside for us to have a really good conversation. I didn't want to get interrupted. So I've got a recording in process hanger that I put on the door. I spoke to the people that are in my house to say, you know, this is like my power hour that I need to really concentrate and focus on. Normally, I'm on where my house is located. I'm on a flight path. If the planes cut the corner, they fly over the house, and it sounds like they're landing in my back garden. But because of what's going on just now, the background noise is quite low. So I knew this was a really important meeting for me to be able to add as much value as I could with no distractions. So for me, it's just about limiting what's around you environmentally, and you know, that's stuff like your phone, it's the noise distractions, it's IMs and beeps. So on my mobile phone, I don't have any of the notifications ever turned on. I know what I need to do every day as a priority, and stuff like social media, the news, email notifications, all that, I don't need to see it 10 times a day or 50 times a day or how many times people look. A couple of times a day is enough for me, in the morning and the evening, just to check in. So I think it's about, number one, being aware of how you get distracted, and from a physical point of view, again, putting strategies in place that will help you manage those. And then optimum working conditions is a really good one. So, and it's very different for every single person. So you might need to sort of test it and trial it to see, but most people tend to have a few points in the day where if they've had a good night's sleep, they are on fire for like maybe an hour, 45 minutes to maybe 90 minutes. And then they have these ebbs and flows. And it's really important, I think, if you want to get the most from your day, to know exactly when that optimum time is for you. So I'm an early bird. So usually between like 8:30 and 10 is really good for me. And then I kind of have another kind of big jump about 6:30, 7 o'clock for another about an hour and a half. And everything in between is it's not as good quality in terms of energy and thought for me. So when I know when my optimum time is, I make sure that I plan my most important tasks and priorities to do during those times. And then there's other things that you can play around with. So really funny story, I discovered this completely by accident. I was in the middle of doing a really important task years and years ago to do with my cycling career. I was trying to convince the performance director of British Cycling to put me on his squad, and I put some background music on, and I like movie soundtracks and stuff. So a bit of Gladiator or Transformers, a bit of Hans Zimmer and things. And I think I'd had it playing in the background, and it had skipped through to other movies that I wouldn't normally pick. And Pirates of the Caribbean music came on, and it played the full soundtrack, and I had gone into a complete trance. And when I finished coming out of this, like being in the zone, what I had completed absolutely blew my mind. It just was, for some reason, helped my creativity, and it helped me get into a zone that I needed to bring out the best that I could. So there's things like music, whether people like to move around or sit, standing. So I like to move around a lot because I'm an athlete. So all my podcast interviews I do standing to help me move a little bit. Whether, what clothes you wear. There's lots of different little things that if you play around with, or you think back historically, you'll probably be able to create a small list of things that will help you do your absolute best in terms of priority tasks during a day. I spoke to a managing director back in January time about this, and he discovered his optimum working place was a dental office waiting room. Completely discovered it by accident. He had a dental appointment. He arrived early. He was there about an hour before, and the amount of work that he got done in that hour, I don't know if it was just the quiet time, a little bit humdrum, but not enough for him to be distracted. I don't know if there's like a smell or some kind of music in the background, but now his when he has dental appointments, he always goes at least an hour early, and his PA books her diary out the afternoon of the dental appointment because she knows that she's going to get a bunch of notes and actions to do because he's been in the zone and been firing out work to her. So distraction control and optimum working conditions, it's about testing and listening and playing around with it to see what works for you. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. Hey, if we could, we still got a little bit of time here, but I want to go back to your competitive days. Talk about your transformation when it comes to cycling. Your story from when you first started, and I know you mentioned one time it was a laughing stock, but then to world domination. What was that like? And another thing I want to ask you about, if you could tie it in, is you mentioned something before about a mindset shift that led to Olympic swimming glory. I'm assuming that's another person, but I'm curious because I'm wondering if it might be you, but I'm guessing it's another person. But talk about your own personal transformation going from the bottom to the top of cycling, and then shift into the story about how that mindset shift led to Olympic swimming glory.
Yeah, there's some crossover between both. So I think back in the late 90s, British cycling was the laughing stock of the cycling world. The Olympic medals that they got were very much from outsiders who, they weren't professionals. They were people that trained in their garages and out in the roads on their own back and on their own funding. And one of the principles that British cycling brought in, which I built into my training in both the end of my judo career and supported me through my cycling and my business careers, called marginal gains, which is where you take, you might have a big challenge or a big problem, and the principle of marginal gains is where you chunk it down into bite-sized pieces and you aim to make improvements, and it might only be 1% improvement in each section, but when you put them all back together again, the gain that you have compounded is much bigger. So the most common, so I guess from my own experience, that might have been that if I was able to get 2% gains in strength in the gym and 1% gain through the gloves that I was wearing, in terms of being able to give me really good grip strength and be able to control the bike. Things like, for athletes, obviously your sleep is really important. So if you can increase the quality of your sleep by just a couple of percent, all of these things added together can give you a much bigger gain. And how that connects to the swimming story, it was a very famous athlete swimmer called John Neighbour from the 1970s, and he was racing in the relay event in one of the Olympics in the 1970s, and he raced the early rounds, and during the final he was replaced by Mark Spitz, And so he didn't get an Olympic medal, even though he'd raced the earlier rounds. And they went on and won gold and so on. So he promised himself that he would never, ever be in that position again. And he wanted to be in a medal winning position the following Olympics. So he picked his main event and he looked at historically what the times had been like. So he was using data and looking at facts and figures to see what he thought would be the winning time for the next Olympics. And the difference between his personal best and what he predicted was the winning time was 4 seconds, which in a swimming event is ginormous. And he had 4 years to close that gap, but that was absolutely huge. At an elite level that he was already at. He'd already raced at the Olympics. So he was ready to give up. He thought the gap was too big, and he was going to just throw his towel in, so to speak. And then it suddenly dawned on him that he had 4 seconds and 4 years. So it's 1 second a year. And he broke it down, right down to how much he had to gain or improve by on a daily basis. And what he needed to improve by was like 1/16 of a blink of an eye every single day.
Wow.
So that's what he did. He worked out what he needed to improve by. He worked out and planned how he was going to improve, and he just consistently did those things every single day. And he raced at the Olympics 4 years later, and the time that he predicted for Olympic gold, he achieved by 1/100th of a second.
Wow.
And he not only won the Olympic gold in that event, he also picked up 3 or 4 other Olympic medals in the same Olympic Games. And I think he has 5 to his name now, which for 1970s is pretty good. So both stories are around understanding really clearly what you want and breaking that down into bite-sized, much more manageable chunks, and then backward engineering what you need to do and consistently doing those actions. Obviously for Olympic sports, it's 4 yearly cycles, but they have little mini cycles within that. So it's a bit different for business because you don't have a defined Olympic cycle, but you can choose what your cycle is and how long you want to hit specific goals and targets and the vision for your own business. So both of those principles are something that anybody can take outside of the sport and apply into their business or their personal lives today. Nice.
That's an awesome story. And by the way, I appreciate how you tied the two together. And I'm a huge Olympics fan myself. My first Olympics I saw was 1968. I was 5 years old, and there was a guy named, I think it was Bob Beamer, did this incredible running long broad jump, like 28 feet, something like that. And just that the record stood for decades until Carl, I can't remember his last name, finally broke that record like 30 some odd years later. But I've always been hooked on Olympics. Every summer I watch Summer Olympics that they're on every 4 years, every Winter Olympics. And I actually got to go to the 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid, New York. And I got to see the Americans beat the Russians and the Finns. I was at those games, just remarkable stories of, the resilience of the human spirit and that dedication to victory. And these college kids beat all the professional teams. I mean, it's just an amazing story. But I can tell you what, I could go on about sports because you probably gathered I love sports myself. But if you could, to kind of wrap things up here, I think you've got some people probably pretty intrigued because I personally love your story. I love how you tied what you've learned and applied it to the business life for others to help them. So how can people listening get a hold of you? Is there, website, podcast, a book, special report? What's the best thing I can do to help you help all these folks listening to the podcast? Sure.
So if people want more information, I've created a landing page on my website. So it's www.strive striveChange.org/go and then REIA.
Awesome.
I don't know, Gary, can we add that on to your site? Is there going to be a link just from an accent point of view?
Yeah, what we'll do
I think the E's and the A's for me are sometimes mixed up. So www.strivechange.org/go REIA. And I've got a video and email series, both from a sporting lessons applied to business, which goes into some of what I've talked about in a bit more detail. And for those that are interested in supporting their teams through crisis and change, there's a video and email series on that as well. So you're more than welcome to visit the page. And if you want to get in touch, my email address is on there as well.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely put that in the show notes. And I think I speak for a lot of people that I think the podcast is being downloaded in 50 some odd countries now. So maybe hopefully right in Scotland too. And some of your friends and neighbors will hear you. So, but I think I speak for a lot of people, and I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your valuable, precious time and experience, and the words of wisdom and the encouragement, and more importantly, the offer to help and support, especially right now. Everybody, man, you'd be crazy not to take advantage of this. So check it out, strivechange.org/go REIA. REIA is Real Estate Investor Agent, and that's what it stands for. So everybody take care. Have a wonderful rest of the week. God bless you and your families. And Jenny, same to you. God bless you and your family too. And thank you once again.
Thanks, Gary. Brilliant to talk to you and your listeners.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.